Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. In the wake of an environmental collapse that is forcing humanity to shed 20% of its population, a family dinner erupts into chaos when a father plans to enlist in the government's new euthanasia program, which goes horribly awry. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Humane. Luke, have you ever played Super Smash Brothers?
Yes, why do you ask?
Because usually, like whenever you unlock a new character, you get this thing on the screen that says a new character has arrived or a new person has entered the game or whatever. Um, I think now we can safely say a new Cronenberg has entered the arena. Because, yes, this is a film by Caitlin Cronenberg, for those who are unaware. She is the sister of Brandon Cronenberg from Possessor and Infinity Pool, both films we enjoyed quite a bit, and her father, David Cronenberg, who I guess has made some movies, something with a fly, video something another, just really crappy, dumb
Small
movies in my
films.
opinion. Yeah, really small, artsy, fartsy movies. Now who's to say? We love David Cronenberg, we love Brandon Cronenberg, so some big shoes to fill. Definitely, I would not want to be in her position, especially with a directorial debut, because coming right into this, critics are gonna be critics, and they're gonna say some harsh things, expecting her to be, probably like her dad, like her brother. But I was curious, we're starting to see this a lot. You brought it up in a conversation beforehand that we're seeing a lot more of popular, famous filmmakers' children step behind the camera. We're also getting that with Shyamalan later this year with Watcher. So I'm very, very curious to see what you thought, Luke, going into Humane.
Oh, I absolutely hated it. No, this one, was rather intriguing. I watched the trailer for this one. I don't know when it was first released, and I thought that concept there. Yes, we've seen it regularly, but I thought the concept that we were going to zero in on here, where it's we've enlisted and we need two bodies, and who's gonna decide on who's going. I thought that opened up the room for a lot of great tension. So I was really intrigued by this one to see if this was going to live up to that tension aspect that I was hoping it would too. And also how they were going to make use of what I was assuming was going to be this one setting, because it looked like they were at a dinner this whole time. And I gotta say, I did enjoy my time with this one here. Is it something that's absolutely mind blowing that we're probably going to talk about years upon years from now? No, but I think this is certainly, when we're talking about directorial debuts, this is more than competent. When you see shot composition, just some the character work here, and just the story in general, I think while it's not breaking down any barriers that we haven't seen before, this is something where you will enjoy your time with it. I think you'll take away some great scenes with it. So I gotta say, I came out of here pretty positive.
Yeah, I did too. I was honestly pretty surprised because I did not see the trailer for this. I knew that it was Caitlin Cronenberg and I saw the poster. To be honest, the trailer, when it came out, it was all over our Twitter feed. So I scrolled past it a couple times. No real reason, just kind of one of those things where I was like, hey, I'm already sold enough. I'm always down to see what the Cronenberg party has to offer. And I got to say, one of the things that I want to say right off the bat here that really impressed me about Caitlin's approach to this film is, her dad makes movies that, I would say as his career has gone on, even more have really stepped outside the bounds of being something. They're just wild. They're honestly crazy. Like I haven't seen his most recent one. What was that? The one with all the body parts and the people.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I haven't seen
We
it yet either. I haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah,
It's on my
but
list.
we were supposed to check that one out. I want to still. But he's just got these big ideas, and Brandon's really picked up on that as well. And I think they're both obviously great. They're great. We
Crimes of
love
the
them both.
Future.
Crimes of the Future. There you go. But I was really, really sitting here thinking, okay, is this just going to be another one of those, or is she going to give us something different? I got to say, the thing that I appreciate the most about her approach to this is just how much more pulled back and reserved her effort was. It's a very strong concept with this idea of, the Earth needing to shed 20% of its population, and just what that looks like when you have this kind of lottery, almost volunteer enlistment type deal, where you have to kind of decide, hey, am I going to go put my name down on a forum, and if I get pulled, I get pulled, and I got to euthanize myself essentially. What that was going to be like, and I really love that setup, but I honestly appreciate more of the human story that was told here, rather than focusing on just how weird and how uncomfortable all of that can get. Now, mind you, it gets a little uncomfortable and it gets a little weird. It's a little paint by numbers, but I do think this is a strong first outing.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued to see what a bigger audience is going to think of this film, just because when you hear that last name Cronenberg, you're going to think, immediately off the wall kind of aspects. And this is more of a dialed down take than what we used to see from the Cronenberg clan. So, I did appreciate that as well, because this is more of a realistic story. When you think dystopian, I think, we are really thinking years upon years upon years ahead, and it's going to be something we can't really relate to. But this is a very relatable concept here, especially with our characters. You're dealing with, a lot of privilege in terms of our family here. You had brought up earlier the fall of the House of Usher, and I think, that is a lovely comparison, although, that was a series and we had way more time with them. Whereas here, we get just enough with the characters. We don't do any deep dives, but there are some motivations that are unveiled here, and some issues that we have seen from characters that I rather love the unveiling, especially with Jay Baruchel's character. He unveils something about our character Noah in his past, and I love the way that is unveiled. It's not like a big thing; it's during a fight, and we kind of get where he's coming from. And I love that aspect of it, because it's not something that is treated as a giant unveiling to the audience. It's just something, hey, the entire room knows about it. Now we're talking, and hey, this is why he is guilty to, or Jared J. Burshall's character. I like those aspects of it. I think it felt organic, and I do think you do fall into that organic feeling a lot of times, especially when you're dealing with all these actors that are supposed to be family. I felt myself kind of, intertwined in the aspects, I guess, in politics of the York family.
Yeah, I really like how they tie in a lot of the politics in this, because it does reflect a lot of like our modern day conversations and things like that. That character you bring up of Jay, how did you say his name? Last name? Barshall.
Jay, yeah, Barshall. Yep.
Marshall. Yeah, we were just debating that before we started recording. But yeah, Jay Marshall definitely plays against type for him from the stuff I've seen him in before, which was very entertaining. I think he fits really well into this universe. And then I really found myself enjoying the performance of Enrico Colantani, which is the character of Bob. I thought was just awesome. He's definitely, like Luke had said off screen, he's got the most scenery to chew in a lot of the ways. Like he's just got this very kind of upbeat and sinister performance to his character that I just found myself enjoying quite a bit. Every time that he was on screen, it was like you're laughing, but you're also very uncomfortable, because what's at stake.
And this opens up with such an upbeat kind of scene as to the morbidness that's happening in the background. I absolutely loved it. Sometimes that can get overused, or just feels like it's trendy at the time, I think. But this one, I think, was pulled off rather well. I love the Bob character as well. I think, he had a rather interesting hook. I think we did see a lot of different choices. I think he was the one that honestly had the most choices, oddly, out of all the characters here, even though he had the most power, which was rather intriguing, especially with the choices that he does make here. But, overall, I think, that worked well. There's aspects that, his character is melding with the family in general, and then a certain family member later on in the film, and I think those scenes were a lot of fun as well, just to see that dynamic. So yeah, that stuff really did work for me, as well as just kind of this. I forget what the acronym is, but the cleanup crew, the people who come for you when you enlist. I think that aspect was done rather well. It just felt you know, organic to how that would be in real life if that actually did happen, and that I think added to that grounded take as well.
I agree. There was a lot of really, I guess, like nice reflections of just kind of what we deal with. And I thought that it was also interesting that we went with a environmental collapse. It's something we don't see a whole lot of. And just the solution that they came up with to bring this, but there's also that element of governmental distrust, and some people saying that why would they lie, and others saying, well, yeah, of course they're going to lie. And I really think that it adds to these dynamics quite well. There's also another angle to this with one character who's adopted. That's all I'll say, and it really plays with you there. And it's nice to see, again, this kind of fall of the House of Usher technique of having these family members, this infighting, but on a much smaller scale. And I got to say, I think that Caitlin Cronenberg definitely kind of carved out a little slice of her own in this. It does definitely fall in line with what the Cronenberg name has kind of grown to expect from it, with it being very well shot, very high class, presented with a high concept, idea. And I think that she was just able to kind of stray away from the over the top body horror, or the over the top kind of like visuals, and kind of stick to a more grounded story that again plays more into the human aspect of its characters, rather than trying to twist your mind and blow you away. Now, I will say, the ending for me, I felt left on a bit more of a whimper than a roar, and that was a bit disappointing. I feel like everything was kind of building up, and we get to a certain point where we kind of jump in time, and then it was just like, oh, okay, yeah. Especially the last line of dialogue, even from a character I loved, I was like, okay, whatever, fine.
Yeah. I was hoping for a little more toward the end, as well as we're building up to the series of events that we, have been waiting for, and we really take the chain off, and it just kind of ends for me, rather than, something where I'm like, you know, when you watch a film and you get a glorious ending and you kind of just sit back and you're like, that was really good. You don't get that here for me. It was something where, oddly enough, like, I had my fill with the film, but it felt like there was more to be done, because of that ending. It left you wanting more, even though I think the story for that hour 30 runtime is serviceable. So it didn't feel like it dragged for me. It didn't feel like it was too fast paced. It just felt right. But then by the end of it, it just feels like, I wish we would have had a little extra here just to add on so we could feel satisfied. And I think that's where there are moments of gore in here. We have those aspects of it, but it's not an overabundance that I think maybe people will go in expecting here. So I think, when you have that expectations, maybe pull that back a little bit, because you're not going to get it. I think when it does happen, it does work, but it's not something where there's an overabundance here of that.
Absolutely. It's again a strong first outing. You can definitely see Caitlin taking her first few steps here as far as helming a feature film, and I think that there's some pretty great first steps. I think that there's definitely a lot to pay attention with her. She's somebody that I definitely think can carve out kind of her own voice, which has been a really consistent trend with the Cronenberg family. You can tell that DNA is there, but they both, her and her brother, seem to be taking slightly different approaches than their dad did, which you love to see. But yeah, so for me, I'm honestly going to give Humane a recommend. I think that this is a very solid recommend. I think that you should check this thing out. It is in limited release right now, so you can go out to the theater and check it out, but it will be available on Shudder later this year, I think within a month or two. And yeah, you'll be able to check it out there. So if you don't get a chance to see it in theaters, definitely follow back up with this one on VOD, which also I forgot to mention, you can get it on VOD currently. But Luke, where are you sitting with Humane?
I'm right there with you. This is going to be a recommend for me as well. Again, just because last name's Cronenberg, don't expect some off the wall body horror, wild dystopian future. This is a little more of a reserved story. It's a condensed story. We are pretty primarily in one setting here with just a handful of characters, and really dealing with the inner workings of the York family, and this new element of, being enlisted and who is going to be that next body. Bob character is absolutely wonderful. I think there are a lot of great shots in here. The blues on the jumpsuits really pop out. There's a opening dinner scene that I really love because of the way that they shoot the food and the way that it looks on film. I think looks great as well. And there are some reoccurring shots like that in here. I think you'll be able to, if you have a cinematic eye and you really enjoy that stuff, I think you'll eat well when you watch this film. Overall, looking at it, I think as a horror fan, you have that horror appetite. You might want a little more to satisfy that, but I think this works certainly as like a socio-political thriller, certainly. But there's a lot of great stuff here. When they do add in that gore, it works perfectly. I'm curious to see what Caitlin will do eventually with an even bigger film, as we can deep dive into her filmography and see what she produces. Definitely a recommend for me. I did enjoy my time with Humane, so if it is playing in a theater near you, I would recommend going out to see that, or take a chance and get this thing streaming.
Absolutely. But alrighty, guys, it's going to wrap us up for our review of Humane. Let us know down below what you thought, if you got a chance to check it out over the weekend, or if you're going to go ahead and rent this thing, or just wait for it to hit Shudder. Like I said, you won't have to wait too long. Let us know, what is your favorite Cronenberg film from the entire family? So, doesn't just have to be David. We could talk about Brandon, or hey, if you want to say it's Humane, go for that one as well. But yeah, other than that, guys, we've got a lot of great stuff up on the channel, more reviews to come in the future. And yeah, it's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.